A little while ago, I made a video on the 10 most common questions to appear in the IELTS speaking test. And in today's lesson, I've invited Conor, who is an IELTS expert and university professor, to give me his answers, most likely his band 9 answers to these 10 common questions. So, Conor, thank you very much for coming on today.
Welcome. Thank you for having me back. Am I now the most uh, frequent guest on your show, on your channel? This is my third appearance.
Yes, your third appearance. That's right. Yes, your first
Most
one was a
features.
speaking test. Your second was the most difficult questions I could possibly ask you. And now in this video, I'm going to be asking you the most common IELTS questions. Are you ready?
I hope so.
Okay. So, question one. Tell me about the house or apartment you live in.
Thank you. There's nothing particularly remarkable about the house I live in. It's a five-story building in Paris. I'm a bit of a minimalist. I don't have a lot of very expensive possessions, so yeah, it's fine. It serves its purpose. It's a roof over my head.
Have you lived in this home for a long time?
I guess so, on and off for about a year. I use this home more or less as the base of operations when I'm in Europe because I have to travel a lot for work. So I'm not always here, but between when I started living here and now, presently, it's about a year.
Is there anything you would like to change about your home?
Not really. And you know me. I'm quite, I'm something of a low maintenance kind of guy. I don't need a lot of things to make me happy. One thing I would like is, if I could, I would like to change the door frame, change my door frame because I cannot hang a pull-up bar on it. It's just the shape of the door and the shape of the pull-up bar, they don't match. So I actually cannot hang my pull-up bar in my doorway, which is rather annoying.
Have you always lived in the same town or city?
No, I'm Irish. Obviously, I was raised in Ireland, but I've lived and worked abroad for a decade now.
Why?
Because rent is expensive and food is not free, so I had to go where there was employment. But also, I've always wanted to just live abroad, experience other cultures.
What do you like about the city that you currently live in?
I currently live in Paris, and I don't like a great deal about it. Actually, no, that's not true. If I were to be honest, the proximity or Paris's proximity to Fontainebleau, which is a little village to the south of Paris, that pleases me because the world's best outdoor bouldering or outdoor climbing is there in the deep forests, and it's a beautiful place to visit. So actually, I really like that about this place, but it's a short list.
Would you always like to live in this city?
As I just said, no, I would not. Paris, like Dublin, I think I said before in a previous video, is prohibitively expensive, and I actually would say it is unjustifiably expensive to live here.
Um, let's move on. Let's talk about what you do. Do you work or study?
Technically, I do both. I'm a university teacher, but I've always made it a point whenever I have spare time, like I do now during the summer, to study a course. Even if it's a short course online, I try to learn something. And I'm always trying to learn a language. So I currently study Chinese and French. And I just enrolled in an online introduction to coding course because I know nothing about coding and I wanted to learn a little bit.
But let's talk about your work. So you said you're a university professor. Have you
Yeah.
been doing this job for a long time?
Yes and no. So I've worked in the sector for a decade, but during that 10-year period, I've held a variety of different positions. Um, University professor, course designer, examiner, coordinator, technical writer, designing documents for designing materials and documents for departments. So exclusively as a university professor, no, but I do have I think about 5 years, maybe this might be my sixth year as a university teacher.
What would make your work easier?
Working from home, that I'm very much on one side of this discussion. I am a huge advocate for working from home. I think whilst I acknowledge there are arguments in favor of working in an office and working in person, there are far more arguments in favor of working from home. You have zero commute. You have zero physical interaction with people you don't like, and you're never more than 10 meters from your own toilet. Like this is a hill for me to die on. I am a fan of working from home.
Why did you choose your job?
I don't really know, to be perfectly honest. There's a great quote by John Lennon, isn't it? Life is what happens when you're making other plans. And I think whilst I've always liked learning and I've always enjoyed speaking and performing and rhetoric, I never actually wanted to be a teacher. I never wanted to work in a university. When I was at university, I couldn't wait to leave. But like so many things in life, it just sort of happened whilst I was making my way through life. And now I quite like it. But in terms of it, if the question was that a conscious decision? No. When I was at school, I did not want to be a teacher.
Thank you very much, Connor. Okay, Connor, very nice answers. What we're going to do now is look at some of the answers in a bit more detail and try and pick out some of the language that you used. So, question number one, I asked you, tell me about the house or apartment you live in. You said, thank you. There's nothing particularly remarkable about the house I live in. It's a 5-story building in Paris. I'm a bit of a minimalist. I don't have a lot of very expensive possessions. So, yeah, it's fine. It serves its purpose. It's a roof over my head. Okay, let's have a look at some of the language that you used here. So, you said, there's nothing particularly remarkable about the house I live in. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think this is. I have to kind of go back a little bit and look at the question before I answer, or before I talk about the answer, because the question itself, even though it is a common question, I think the way people answer it uh, tends to focus on a physical description of their house. I think when people hear "tell me about the house or apartment you live in," what they hear is tell me about, like, describe what your house looks like. Describe what is in your house. Give me a physical description.
Hmm,
And I mean, sometimes you might get asked a question like that, which is very, very closed.
hmm,
Like you have to give a very specific response. This, to me, people may disagree, and perhaps it is certainly an uncommon response. But the question is actually very open. Just tell me about the house. You could describe what it looks like physically. You could describe what you think about it. You could describe how you feel about it. You're still telling the person about the house you live in or the home apartment you live in. And for me, when I heard the question, I mean, I knew what commonly the answer would be, or what the common response would be, which is tell me physically about the house, or tell me about what it looks like, what floor, how many bedrooms, who do you live with? And My home is not particularly remarkable. It is simple. There's not a lot of things here. As I think I said later, I'm a minimalist. I don't have a lot of possessions. So it's more my response is more, here's how I sort of feel about my home. I'm telling you about it. I'm telling you about how I feel, which is there's nothing special about it. Um, it's as I said later, it serves its purpose. The house has a purpose, which is to keep me safe from the cold, and that's it.
And you said I'm a bit of a minimalist. What does that mean?
A minimalist, somebody who does not like to acquire or buy or keep a lot of possessions. I value space. Like I love being able to, like if I have my phone or a cup, I like being able to put it literally anywhere on the table that isn't the laptop. Like lots of space. I
Mm,
do not like a clutter or a mess. I just like I find it actually has a very calming effect to be in a clean and very tidy space. So, sorry, and I've also been in environments where people have lots of possessions. They keep everything. They never throw anything away. And personally, that just makes me uncomfortable, like physically uncomfortable.
mm.
So in my homes, I got, as you know, Eli Shock, he and I are friends. You know, I have one suitcase and everything I have in the world fits into one suitcase, so I can move anywhere in the world in an hour. So that's how
Right.
I am.
Excellent. And I like the way that you said, I'm a bit of a minimalist. I don't have a lot of very expensive possessions. So you're kind of paraphrasing yourself, aren't you? You're elaborating on what you mean by minimalist in the context that you're giving it.
Yeah, of course. So in case the person who I'm talking to doesn't understand what I mean by minimalism or being a minimalist, I'm just expanding on that point to
Hmm.
clarify it.
And then you also said this, you said it serves its purpose. What did you mean by that?
Well, everything has a function. You know, what is a thing for? So, you know, a meal, you eat it, the function or the purpose of a meal is to stop you being hungry. So you eat a meal, you're no longer hungry, it serves its purpose. And that's the same with the home, and it's the same with most things. I just have a very utilitarian or very function based approach to things. Like I just care about things doing what I need them to do, and I need a home to keep me safe from the cold. I need food to keep me alive. I need sleep to keep my mind at ease.
Hmm. Okay, let's move on to question number two. So I asked you, have you lived in this home for a long time? And you said, I guess so, on and off for about a year. I use this home more or less as the base of operations when I'm in Europe because I have to travel a lot for work. So I'm not always here, but between when I started living here and now, presently, it's about a year. Right, let's have a look at that, some of the language that you used. So I liked this phrase, on and off for about a year. What does that mean?
Not constantly.
Yeah.
So the implicit grammar there is, you know, have you lived? Response: I have lived here on and off for about a year, and on and off, as far as I understand grammar, is an adverb. You're describing the verb live.
Yeah.
So I have not lived here constantly. There's been a period of time when I am here. There's a period of time, or there has been a period of time where I'm not here. So it
Mm.
has not been constant. It has been on and off, like a light switch. You turn it on. Sometimes it's on. You turn it off.
And you elaborate on that as well. You said you see where you're living now as a base of operations. What about that phrase? What does that mean?
The place where you the place where you stay and take care of your business, or if you have things to do when you're in an area, the one place where you stay.
Mm.
Sort of like a company has a headquarters, like a main office in an area. So a lot of companies have their base of operations or headquarters in Ireland, in Dublin, for example. Well, when I'm in Europe, I mean, I could live anywhere, but I have chosen to be in Paris when I am in Europe. That's where I stay.
And so, what would you think if you asked somebody, "Where do you live?" and they just replied, "My base of operations is in Prague." Would that be appropriate?
Well, again, if you take it out of, if that's your direct response to the question, like, have you lived in this area for a long time, or where do you live? And the first thing you say is my base of operations. I mean, it's not incorrect as long as you either expand on that and explain why you have used that phrase, or before you use that phrase, you have provided context. So, for example, if you look at my answer, the first thing I said was, on and off, not always. That means I have a home, or I stay here, but I also stay somewhere else. So I have provided context. Then I've used a phrase like my base of operations. It's the place I stay, the one place I stay when I am here. So again, to answer your question, it does depend. How have you provided context, or are you going to provide context? If you give a one sentence response, my base of operations is Prague, it might sound a little inappropriate or a little odd without explanation.
Yes. So certainly, it definitely requires an explanation. Let's look at number 3. So I asked you, is there anything you would like to change about your home? So this is quite a tricky question. It throws a lot of students off. You said, not really. You know me, I'm something of a low maintenance kind of guy. I don't need a lot of things to make me happy. One thing I would like is, if I could, I would like to change the door frame because I cannot hang a pull-up bar on it. It's just the shape of the door and the shape of the pull-up bar, they don't match. So I cannot hang my pull-up bar in my doorway, which is rather annoying. So there's probably quite a lot of vocabulary here that needs to be explained.
I do like the way you quote my words. It's fun.
Yeah,
Fun
I
for me.
sound very different to you,
I'm
don't
kind
I?
of a low maintenance guy.
So what do you mean by a low maintenance kind of guy?
Well, something. Sorry, excuse me. Simple. If something is low maintenance, it does not require a lot of effort. And if you describe yourself as being low maintenance, it means you don't need a lot of things or a lot of conditions to be happy. So, for
Hmm.
example, again, like the description I gave of my house, it's a roof over my head. I don't need more from that. I don't need a five-star hotel to be happy.
Hmm.
So, being a low maintenance kind of guy or kind of person means, yeah, you're very simple. Making you happy is actually a rather simple prospect or process, excuse me. And there's the opposite to that, which is to be high maintenance. And if you are high maintenance, you need a lot of things in order to be comfortable or to be happy. And that does not describe me.
Yes. So basically, kind of any adjective you could put here, right? Just to describe somebody. So in your case, you said a low maintenance kind of guy. We could also say a high maintenance kind of guy or kind of
Yep.
person. What other adjectives could you put here?
Uh, you could use the phrase easily pleased, or you could say it's not difficult to please me, or it's
Hmm.
not difficult to make me happy. Like much simpler phrases.
But what kind of adjectives? So, for example, we could say a high maintenance kind of guy, or I guess you could say a relaxed kind of
Mhm.
guy. Or,
Easygoing would be another one, I guess. You could use it in this context. You could say I'm an easygoing kind of guy, which
yes, yep.
again means it doesn't take a lot of things to make you happy.
Yeah, great. A relaxed and easygoing kind of guy. Yeah. So any adjective really to describe someone you can put into this phrase, a
Yeah.
something kind of guy. And again, the nice thing is afterwards you explained why. You said, I don't need a lot of things to make me happy.
Mm.
And then you also have a conditional sentence as well, right? You have, um, if I could, I would like to change the door frame. So this is a second conditional. Um, And again, that's kind of, it's seen as an advanced grammar. So if you're using conditionals correctly, you're going to be getting the score for that. And then you've got this kind of cause below. You said cause, and that's basically when you're speaking. If you're writing, you wouldn't write cause, would you?
No, not at all. And that's actually, now that you mentioned that, something that something that I notice is just how different grammar is when you're speaking versus when you are writing. I would never write like this. You
Right.
can see that there are some like fragments of sentences where I start the sentence, I finish one clause, I insert or I put in the start of another one, because when we speak, you understand what I'm meaning, but or what I mean, excuse me. But when you write, you would never write this in this sort of loose style where the grammar is not as tight.
Right.
And yeah, you would never write cause. You would say because.
Hmm. Yeah. But when you're speaking, it makes perfect sense. I can understand what you're saying perfectly. Is there any other language you'd like to pick up on there before we move on to number 4?
Uh, nothing that I think most people would probably understand. I think you've covered the main important pieces of vocabulary.
Okay, let's look at number 4. So I said, have you always lived in the same town or city? You said, no, I'm Irish, obviously. I was raised in Ireland, but I've lived and worked abroad for a decade now. And then I wanted you to elaborate on the answer. So I asked, why? And you said, because rent is expensive and food is not free. So I had to go where there was employment.
Mhm.
But also, I've always wanted to just live abroad, experience other cultures. Okay, so lots of lovely phrases here.
Actually, this is another example, and it's not a particularly important one because obviously, when you listen, the grammar can be somewhat interchangeable. But so when I was speaking, and if I if I had been writing, it would have been no, I'm Irish, full stop, full stop. Obviously, comma, I was raised in Ireland. So obviously, I was raised in Ireland because I am Irish. Whereas here, when you heard it slightly differently. Again, not particularly important, but it just shows you the difference between spoken and written grammar. Like there will
Yes.
be no confusion. If I were to write that, there will be zero confusion about where the adverb obviously is.
Yes, that's true. Yeah. But again, I mean, when you're speaking it, it makes perfect sense. So
Yeah,
you
it makes
started with the
sense.
phrase to be raised in Ireland. What do you mean by that?
Where was I raised, Eli?
Oh, to to be raised in Ireland.
In Ireland.
Ireland.
It's the place where you grew up, where you spent your formative years, or generally speaking, it's understood to mean up until the ages of adulthood. So up until the age of 18, or when you move abroad or go to university, things like that.
Exactly. And then decade?
10 years. Another
Yes.
way of saying 10 years.
Yeah. It's a great phrase actually. A decade, 10 years. I also like this. I had to go where there was employment. So that's a relative clause. So where there
Mhm.
was employment. So again, the kind of thing that would
Mhm.
help you to boost your score for grammatical range and accuracy. And then experience other cultures. That's a very nice collocation and a
Mhm.
good reason for or a good collocation to use when you're describing the importance of living abroad or traveling or being a tourist as well, to experience other cultures. Should we have a look at question number 5?
Yep. Let's shoot on.
Okay. What do you like about the city you currently live in? I currently live in Paris and I don't like a great deal about it. Actually, no, that's not true. If I were to be honest, the proximity or Paris's proximity to Fontainebleau, which is a little village to the south of Paris, that pleases me because the world's best outdoor bouldering or outdoor climbing is there in the deep forests. And it's a beautiful place to visit. So actually, I really like that about this place, but it's a short list. Okay,
Yeah, it's a short.
it is indeed a short list. Not too much you like about Paris, to be honest. Okay. So what about this phrase? I don't like a great deal about it. So what is a great deal?
A lot of things. You could easily say this. There are not a lot of things I like, or I don't. I don't like many things about this. I just say I don't like a great deal or a great amount. But again, these phrases all mean the same thing. Like great deal or great amount might be slightly more advanced. I don't like a lot of things. Maybe not 9, but still perfectly understandable, perfectly clear.
Mm. And then I like that you said actually no, which is kind of a bit like saying upon reflection, isn't it? It's
Yeah,
like saying,
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
yeah.
That is a good point. I'm glad you spotted that. I hadn't considered it, but you can revise your own answer. It's not as if, well, I said yes, and I am married to this answer, and I have to stay perfectly faithful to this answer. I mean, it's a conversation. You hear a question, you respond, or you have an immediate response, and then you think, actually, that's not entirely true.
Mm.
There is or are certain things that you enjoy about a place. Like, oh yeah, as you said, upon reflection.
Yes. And then you also talked about outdoor bouldering and outdoor climbing. So you and I
Mm,
know what that is, but a lot of
mm.
people watching this might have no clue what outdoor bouldering is.
Well, Eli, you're the world class climber between the two of us. So what is bouldering?
So bouldering is when you go to do rock climbing, but instead of going up very high cliffs, which you may have seen in movies like Cliffhanger, instead of going up these big cliffs and it's very dangerous, you go up very short pieces of rock. So usually between kind of 1 and 3 meters off the ground. And so you don't have any ropes. If
No.
you fall onto the ground, and usually you bring a mat with you, something that looks a bit like a mattress in order to protect your knees and ankles if you fall off the boulder.
Mhm.
Yes. Um,
And Fontainebleau, as we both know, has world class bouldering. In fact, many people think it's the birthplace or the origin, the creator of bouldering.
yes. And then you also said it's a short list. So what was that in reference to?
Well, actually, that's sort of that's what's called a callback or a reference to the beginning. So the first thing I said was, I don't like a lot of things about this, and then I said, well, actually, upon reflection, here's a thing that I do like. Here's a bit of explanation about it, and then at the very end, I said, but it's a short list of things that I actually like about Paris, about this area. So it's sort of a conclusion to the initial or opening thought.
Great. Okay, number 6. So, would you always like to live in this city? Okay, so the answer is obviously no. Connor is not a big fan of Paris. Let's see what he said. Um, as I just said, no, I would not. Paris, like Dublin, I think I said before in a previous video, is prohibitively expensive. A hard one to say, prohibitively expensive. And I would say that it is unjustifiably expensive to live here. Okay, let's have a look at some of these nice phrases. So we're going to start with the elephant in the room, prohibitively expensive. What does that mean?
Well, something can be expensive, but you can afford it. And
Mm,
then something can be very expensive. Like, well, it costs a lot of money, but I can afford it. If something is prohibitively
mhm,
expensive, it means that it actually stops you from being able to live there. It
mm,
prohibits meaning to stop. So if something is prohibitively annoying or prohibitively expensive or prohibitively boring, it stops you from completing the action. And the action here is living. And that's a bit of an exaggeration, because I mean you can, you know, you can earn a salary and live here, but it's more a comment on the cost of living.
Yes. And yeah, and Paris is certainly an extremely expensive place to live. And then you even said, just to kind of really put your point across, you said it's
Yeah.
unjustifiably expensive. So again, it's kind of similar, isn't it, to prohibitively expensive? So you're really trying to emphasize how unreasonably expensive Paris is.
So you are correct in that it does underline how I feel, but I would say there's a slight difference there. So something can be prohibitively expensive, you know, extremely expensive and worth it. So, for example, some forms of surgery. So, I had eye surgery. I had horrible vision as a child. I had laser surgery on my eyes. It was prohibitively expensive. Like a lot of people can't afford that. I understand. Now, was it unjustifiably expensive? Nope. It makes total sense. You are buying a physical sense. You're buying a sense. I bought a sense which I did not have. You know, the sense of touch, sense of hearing, sense of sight. I think it's a justifiably expensive. It makes sense. It is worth it. And in this context, I think the amount that you pay to live in Dublin, for example, and I say that as an Irishman, the amount that you have to pay to live in Dublin is just, you cannot justify it. Like there's no honest, reasonable explanation for why it is so expensive. Thus, it is both prohibitively and unjustifiably expensive. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Yeah. 10 reasons why Conor is not
My passport is officially cancelled.
I know. Yeah, we'll see if you ever get back to Dublin. They won't let you back in, I think. Okay. And then I asked the very common question, which appears, I think, in so many IELTS questions, the classic, do you work or study? And I really liked your answer. You said, technically,
Thank you.
I do both. I'm a university teacher, but I've always made it a point to, whenever I have spare time, like I do now during the summer, to study a course, even if it's a short course online. I try to learn something. And I'm always trying to learn a language. So I currently study Chinese and French. And I just enrolled in an online introduction to coding course because I know nothing about coding and I wanted to learn a little bit. Okay. So we're going to start with the technically I do both. What do you mean by that?
It, it, sorry, what do you mean by the question?
Well, so what's the technically? Why didn't you just say I do both?
Oh, because you could answer either. I could say, do you work or you're a student? I work. And if I didn't work and I was a student, I would say I am a student. But because in this situation, I am able to provide both answers, an affirmative to both answers. Technically, I do both. Now, I'm not a formal student in the sense that I'm not actually, you know, enrolled in a university as a student, but I do study. Like I study something every single day. There are two languages. Again, I'm still very beginner in these languages, but I am learning something. I am studying something. I am doing an online course, like a simple one. So I mean, I do study, but it might not be the way people usually use the verb study. So technically, you know, if we take a very precise meaning of the verb study and work, technically I do both.
And it's not that just that you study every day, it's that you make it a point to study every day. So what does it mean to make something a point? So make it a point.
You do it consciously and deliberately. It is something about which you care. It's something which is important to you. So some people make it a point to exercise every day. Translation, that is something they care about very deeply, and they follow that. They follow that every single day. Other people make it a point to learn something every day or to practice a language every day. Some people make it a point to be polite. Like that is something which is important to them.
Yeah, so that's great. I make it a point to be polite. I make it a
Yeah,
point to do exercise. You
I
can,
think.
these are great phrases that students can use. And that's something that's very important to them.
Mhm,
Um, we also had to enroll in a course as well.
mhm.
So what's the verb to enroll in something?
To join or to start.
Mm.
So if you enroll in an activity, it just means that you are now an official part of that course. So you enroll in a university degree, you are now a university student in that degree. But again, you could easily say, I just started. Like
Yeah.
it means the same. I started a course, perfectly understandable, perfectly correct, slightly more, precise or slightly more advanced. I just enrolled in a course, but it means the exact same thing
Yeah, so a
in this
student could even say like, I'm enrolled in an online IELTS course, couldn't they?
They 100% could, Eli.
Yeah. Hopefully in an English Pro Tips IELTS course. Um, and okay, yeah, and I think that's good. You enrolled in an online introduction to coding course. So have a
Yes.
big noun phrase there, an online introduction to coding course. Um, because because you know nothing about it. So that's good.
Mhm.
Okay, let's look at
Learn
number 8 then.
coding.
Okay. Have you been doing this job for a long time? So this is about you being a university professor. You said
Mhm.
yes and no. I thought, yes and no. So I've worked in the sector for a decade, but during that
Mhm.
10-year period, I've held a variety of different positions: university professor, course designer, examiner, coordinator, technical writer, designing material and documents for departments. So, exclusively as a university professor, no. But I do have about 5 years. I think this might be about my 6th year as a university teacher. Right, let's have a look at some of the language that you used. So you said worked in the sector. So which sector are you talking about, and what is a sector?
The sector is another term for an industry, and
Yes.
the industry or the area of employment or the area of work that we're talking about is education.
Hmm. Yeah. And then you use that word decade, which
Okay, yep,
is a really
10 years.
useful word here because it's also useful for task one. The academic task one is 10 years. And then you had a nice collocation. No, this one's not going to get rid of. You said held a variety of positions. So to hold positions. So instead of
Mhm.
saying I've worked in different jobs, I've held
Yeah,
positions in.
yeah, yep.
Very nice.
That's yep, yep. I mean, again, you basically there are so many simpler ways to express that. I've just always thought of words as toys, and I like playing with them.
Mm.
And so, yeah, you could say I've had lots of jobs, or I've had different jobs. I've held different jobs. I have had a variety of jobs. I've held a variety of positions. All of these things mean the exact same thing. You're just
Mm.
playing with words.
Yes. So let's put that in. I've had a variety of different jobs. And then you also had when you talked about exclusively
Hmm.
as a university professor, what do you mean by exclusively?
Uh, it's an adverb meaning only.
Yeah.
Again, you could just say only or just. So you could take the exact same question. So um, just as a university professor?
Mhm.
Question mark. Rhetorical question. No.
Mm.
Or you could say exclusively as a university professor? Question mark. No.
Mm. Yeah, great. So great to be pushing your language to that next level with words like exclusively. Um, let's have a look at question number 9. What would make your work easier? So you
Oh yeah, I remember this
answered
question
very
now.
briefly, you said working from home. I thought, and
That's it.
then I'm very much on one side of this discussion. I'm a huge advocate for working from home. Whilst I acknowledge that there are arguments in favor of working in an office and working in person, there are far more arguments in favor of working from home. You have
Just saw
zero
the last
commute,
sentence.
you have zero physical interaction with people you don't like, and you are never more than 10 meters from your own toilet. Is that very important for you, Connor? This is a hill for
Privacy,
me to
Eli.
die on. I am a
Privacy.
fan of working from home. So take us through some of this language. I'm very much on one side of this discussion. What did you mean by that?
Well, I mean, I think that's a cultural issue. In terms of employment, that is a cultural issue nowadays. The discussion, which is better, working from home, working in an office, which do you prefer, which makes more sense, which is more productive, that is, I think, an ongoing debate. And I am completely on one side of that discussion. I agree with one side, which is working from home is superior. It's more productive. It's better. I can't really think of a way in which it's not better. Or sorry, a way which actually means anything to me. So I accept there are arguments, but those arguments mean nothing to me.
Okay, yeah. And you did say that. You said, whilst I acknowledge there are arguments. So take us through that phrase. I'll just write it down while you're talking.
Sure. Well, whilst I acknowledge just means although or though I acknowledge, I accept. So whilst just means though, and acknowledge, I accept. So you could say very simply, yes, I accept that there are arguments to support working offline, working in person. I just chose to say whilst I acknowledge there are arguments, but it means the same thing. I accept there are arguments. I know there are arguments. I know there are reasons. These more or less mean the same thing.
Yes, great.
I will
And then when you're
jump in
using a
if
word
I
like,
can.
uh-huh.
I was just going to say about advocate in the third sentence.
Yeah.
Because I think that is actually quite a nice phrase. I might just point that. You might have been planning to point that out.
No, I missed that one. Go for it.
Okay. Well, yeah. So an advocate, there's again a slight distinction there. I mean, in context, it's clear that I support the idea of working from home. But if you advocate, it's a little more than that. Like a lawyer advocates, they argue for something. So for me, it's not just that I support it. I will actively, I will argue this point with people. So I will try to convince people that this is the correct side. Working from home is superior.
No one's taking you back to the office, Connor.
From my dead hands, Eli.
Away from your toilet. So you said there are far more. So that's a nice phrase. It's just saying there are more. You said there are far more. So emphasizing how important this is for you.
It's emphasis.
And then I like this phrase as well. You have zero commute.
Yep.
What do you mean
Well,
by
actually,
that?
if I can just, I'll answer these in turn. The point far more, I think that's a really good point for pronunciation, actually, because even the way you quoted it to me there, you didn't just say there are far more, you said there are far more. And by stressing far, which is a basic word, like far more is a basic phrase, but when you stress that, you are showing additional extra meaning. It's not just that there are a few more. No, sir, there are far more. There are so many more. And by literally emphasizing or stressing that term, you're saying something without words. Just with the sounds of the words, you are showing extra meaning.
Yes, and that's
good
really
for pronunciation.
Yeah, that's a great thing, because when you're using your pronunciation to communicate your ideas, that's when you're getting those high marks for IELTS. So, and the same person might say far more, and not get the same kind of score, but by really emphasizing far more and
Yeah,
putting
this is
that
something I
stress on
feel
the word far.
strongly about. Yeah.
Yes. And then
And
you also
sorry,
said you have
zero
zero
commute.
commute.
Yeah, the commute is the time that you spend going from the toilet in your home to the toilet at your office. That's a commute. Sorry, just to be clear, it's when you travel to work.
Mhm.
That was a joke, but yeah, the commute actually means to go from your home to work and back. And
Mhm.
to have zero commute means I have no commute. There's no time that I spend traveling to work.
Yeah. And um, and what do you mean by this? Never more than 10 meters from the toilet.
As it stands, as a wait, what do I mean metaphorically, or what do I mean literally? Because I think the sentence is pretty straightforward. Like, nevermore means at no time is there's no exception. You are nevermore means always. So
Yes.
you are never more than 10 meters away from your toilet. You are always within 10 meters. You're always close to.
Mhm.
And of course, the significance of that, I mean, that's not a particularly big deal, but it just means the comfort. Like, you're in your home, you have your things. You don't have to share them with colleagues. It's the privacy. The sentence is supposed to mean the additional privacy and comfort of being in your own home.
That's right. And then you're very adamant about this. You said this is a hill for me to
Hill
die
for
on.
me to die on. So yeah, that phrase, and I rarely use it, but if something is a hill for you to die on, it simply means this is an incredibly important topic for you. It's something that you feel very, very strongly about, and it's something that you will argue basically forever. Like,
Mhm.
it's so important to you that you actually refuse to to stop arguing it. No, no, no. I will die on this hill.
Mm.
I will give everything in support of this argument. That's how important it is to me.
Mm.
Which
I feel
again
like
is also
at the end of this video, there should be a quiz on how much have you learnt about Conor. No, I think that people have learned that you love your pull-up bar, climbing,
I do love my pull-up
working
bar.
from home.
Actually, that's true. I think because when you talk about possessions, when we talk about minimalism, again, side note, you can cut this out if you want. But yeah, I would actually say that my pull-up bar, which I think I bought for 12 euros in 2014, just before I moved to Beijing, that's my favorite possession in the world. And if we remove um, the laser eye surgery, so like if that purchase never happened, I would say my pull-up bar is the best thing I ever bought. Like, the best value, the most important, the most beneficial, the most pleasurable, and it was 12 euros. I believe it was very, very cheap.
Best thing that ever happened to you.
Having a pull-up bar in your house is just, there's a lot of functions with that.
Okay, let's move on to, I think this is the final question. So yeah, it is. Why did you choose your job? So in relation to being a university professor. So you paused for a while and you said, I don't really know, to be perfectly honest. There's a great quote by John Lennon: life is what happens when you're making other plans. And I think whilst I've always enjoyed, whilst I've always liked learning and I've always enjoyed speaking and performing and rhetoric, I never actually wanted to be a teacher. I never wanted to work in a university. When I was at university, I couldn't wait to leave. But like so many things in life, it just sort of happened whilst I was making my way through life. And now I quite like it. But if the question was that a conscious decision? No. When I was at school, I did not want to be a teacher. Okay. So some of the phrases that you used. So you had a quote. Do you think quotes are good things in the IELTS test?
But again, if they demonstrate a point, of course.
Mm-hmm.
So like the 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 central or main meaning of that answer was that, and I believe it to be true, most people don't really grow up wanting to be the thing that they are. and jobs just sort of happen, and you just sort of choose them out of necessity because you need them. And I believe that that quote, "Life is what happens when you're making other plans." Like, you think you're going to do this, and you're working towards this goal over here, and that takes a lot of time. And during that time, you're actually doing what is your real life. So I'm working towards this long-term goal, and during that, I'm a teacher, and I'm developing all these skills, and I'm designing courses, and I'm writing guides and booklets for students. Like,
Mm.
and suddenly, the thing that you didn't know was your life becomes your life.
Yes, great. Now, I've noticed you use this word as well quite a lot, or rather, you've used it twice, I think. So, whilst I'm trying to, it's just the same as while, just for people who are watching this video that might be thinking, what is whilst and is it the same as while? It is basically the same.
Yeah, and it is serving here as a contrast. Like, although I have always enjoyed like learning, and then the contrast there is I never wanted to be a teacher. So you would assume if you like being a teacher, or if you like learning, you would like to be a teacher. And I'm expressing here contrast or opposites. Although, or even though, or whilst, or while I have always liked learning, comma, I never wanted to be a teacher. And they seem like opposites there. So grammatically, I'm showing the contrast or conflict between those two ideas.
Hmm, great. And then we had the final part. Um, I like this phrase. It just sort of happened. What do you mean by that?
It was not planned. It it
Yeah,
happened casually or coincidentally, or just it was not planned.
yeah, great. It was not planned. Um, and then and then you ended with, when I was at school, I did not want to be a teacher. So a very
Mm,
kind of clear ending to the questions. Now, out of all of the questions that I asked you, what do you think
mm.
was the most challenging one? Were any of them challenging, or did any of them get you to kind of think or hesitate while
Well,
you were
yeah.
thinking the
So
answer?
so yes, in the sense that did any of them make me um, consider something other than the question? Yes. So like the first question, which was yeah, tell me about, that was something that I thought about quite a bit because again, as I demonstrated earlier, I don't know how long we've been recording now, but most questions, not just in an IELTS test, just in general, questions are open or closed. And if they're open, there are a variety of ways that you can answer them. And even if they're closed or they seem to be closed, like they're looking for one piece of information, they can also be answered in a very creative way. And then there's a third type of question, which is very closed, very narrow. And when I heard that first question, I thought, okay, well, here's an opportunity again to provide an uncommon answer to a common question, and hopefully to demonstrate the point of, if you learn to understand what you are being asked, that actually opens up a lot more possibilities and makes answering questions a lot easier. So again, to take that example, if you hear the question, tell me about your home, and you think, describe your home, well, you are limited in what you can answer. If you hear that question and you think, oh, that's open, I can talk about what my house looks like, how I feel about my house, what I think about my house. Suddenly you have three options for answering, and all of them can be answered creatively, as opposed to the first choice, which was, oh, well, describe it. I have to give one very specific. There are bedrooms. Here's what they look like. My walls are green. That, again, that's very narrow, and that is something that um, many students now have either commented about in previous videos or have emailed me about. And so I'm just going to mention here that is something that I've been writing about. I haven't finished yet, or rather, I am not finished yet. Excuse me, I'm not finished yet um, because it's a complicated topic, and I want to make it as simple as possible. But like that idea, how can you look at the question and quickly identify what type of question is it, and how many types of answers could I give? That's something that really interests me, and something that I am working on.
Great. And well, hopefully You're working on it now. By the time this video comes out, hopefully you will have finished, and there'll be a link to that in the description below this video.
Yep. I'll do my best. And again, you can put a link in the description below. There are other guides like how to structure answers that students can review. I mean, there are free samples if people just want to if people just want to see what my head or what's inside my head, they can have a look.
Well, I think they've seen a bit of a glimpse of what's inside your head today, and I'm not sure if everyone's going to love it.
That's true. You know.
All right, Conor, thank you very much for coming on today and giving your answers to the 10 most common questions in IELTS.
Thank you, Eli. A pleasure as always.
All right. Bye then.
All right. Bye, buddy.